The first sound I heard was laughter, my sister's, sharp as broken glass. It wasn't the warm kind of laughter that pulls people closer. No, Victoria's laugh had always been the kind that left a sting behind, like she was enjoying a private joke at your expense. I was 27 the first time I heard it aimed at me. I'd just announced I was marrying David, the farmer with soil-stained hands and quiet eyes who had stolen my heart. You? With a man who grows lettuce? She chuckled over her champagne flute. Rachel, you have an MBA from Northwestern. You could have been someone. That word, someone, hung over me for years. 15 years later, I still hear it echo when I walk through our fields at sunrise, dew clinging to the leaves, the smell of earth and promise rising all around me. David doesn't hear it. For him, the land speaks louder than any insult. But for me, Victoria's voice has always been a ghost that follows me home, hiding in the corners of every holiday gathering and every family phone call. My parents never stopped her. They were proud of both of us, but in different ways. To them, Victoria was the achiever, the one in glass towers and tailored suits. I was the one in boots, the one who traded a corner office for wide skies. They thought love was enough of an answer. But love doesn't silence a sister who needs an audience. Now, on the morning of my daughter's wedding, that ghost had found its way into my kitchen again. David was sitting at the table, reading the guest list one last time, when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten.
Victoria.
Can't wait for Emma's big day, her text read. I've prepared something special for her. David looked up, sensing the shift in my breath the way only he can. What's wrong? I showed him the phone. He scanned the words, then set it down slowly, his weathered fingers tapping once against the wood. Don't let her spoil this. But his jaw betrayed him, tight as stone. I tried to smile. She said it's a surprise. And when has one of her surprises ever been kind? He wasn't wrong. Christmas dinners, graduation parties, even ordinary Sunday brunches, Victoria had a way of turning celebrations into stages. Her comments weren't daggers, they were paper cuts, small enough to laugh off, deep enough to bleed. And now, on the one day Emma deserved pure light, Victoria was coming with a plan. I glanced out the window. Beyond the kitchen, our vineyard stretched across rolling Oregon hills, each row of vines lit gold by early sun. It looked like peace. It looked like the life we built quietly, patiently, without her approval. But peace is fragile when you know the storm is already on its way. David rose, kissed my forehead, and whispered the phrase he'd said 100 times over the years. Patience, Rachel. The land teaches us that. I nodded, but inside, I wasn't patient. I was bracing. Because in just a few hours my sister, my only sister, would walk into my daughter's wedding, dressed to conquer, armed with words sharp enough to ruin the day. And for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to stop her. The morning of the wedding felt too perfect, the kind of day you almost mistrust. Willow Creek Vineyard shimmered in late September light, rows of vines curling toward the horizon. White chairs had been arranged in neat symmetry beneath the oak trees, their bows of lavender swaying in a light breeze. Emma's dream was alive in every detail, the barn strung with fairy lights, the smell of fresh bread rising from the caterer's ovens, the champagne on ice. I should have been floating on joy. Instead, my chest was tight. Because Victoria was coming. I tried to ignore the thought as I helped Emma with her veil. She looked radiant, her eyes wide with nervous excitement. For a moment, I was transported back to when she was 5, twirling in her rain boots between the rows of carrots, announcing she'd grow up to be the boss of the farm. Mom, she whispered now, sensing the faraway look on my face. I forced a smile. You're stunning. That's all I was thinking. But even as I said it, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I turned toward the sound, a sleek Tesla gliding up the driveway, glossy and out of place against the rustic setting. The door opened like theater curtains, and out stepped Victoria in a designer dress that shimmered like it had been sewn with arrogance. Her husband, Robert, trailed behind, his tie already crooked, his eyes avoiding mine. David joined me, his arm brushing mine. Here we go. Victoria spotted us instantly. She didn't walk toward us so much as she arrived, chin high, sunglasses flashing. "Rachel," she sang, air kissing my cheek with perfume strong enough to mask sincerity. "What a charming little venue. Rustic. So very you." Her gaze drifted to the barn, lips curling as if she were touring a petting zoo. I swallowed the retort rising in my throat. "Emma's day. Not mine." Victoria turned to David. "Still keeping busy with carrots?" she asked sweetly, as though his life's work were a hobby. David's jaw shifted, but he said nothing. He never did. His silence was armor. And then, the moment I dreaded most. She leaned closer, lowering her voice, but not enough to avoid being overheard by the nearby staff. "I have a surprise plan for Emma. Something inspirational. I'll need the microphone during the reception." My stomach dropped. The ceremony itself was flawless. Emma walked down the aisle with sunlight woven into her veil, Marcus trembling as if he'd been given a miracle he couldn't quite hold. Guests dabbed their eyes, the vineyard glowed, and for half an hour, the world felt exactly as it should. But peace is fragile. It never lasts long when Victoria is in the room. At the reception, she stationed herself near the entrance, like a queen greeting her subjects. Each guest was met with a story about her latest board meeting, her latest promotion, her exhausting flights from San Francisco. She dropped names like pearls, making sure no one forgot her shine. I kept my distance, trying to shield Emma. But the truth? I was shielding myself, too. 15 years of paper cuts had left scars I still pretended didn't ache. Dinner was served, a farm-to-table spread that told the story of our land. Heirloom tomatoes, rosemary roasted carrots, artisanal breads kneaded in our kitchen. People murmured their delight, forks pausing in midair as if surprised that simple farming could taste so rich. I should have been proud. Instead, I braced. The moment came when Tyler, our young MC, nervously tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with the toasts from the best man and maid of honor, the bride's aunt has requested a few words." My pulse spiked. David's hand slid over mine beneath the table. 3 squeezes, our code for trust me. But even he couldn't stop the dread crawling up my spine. Victoria rose with theatrical grace, the spotlight finding her as if she'd summoned it. Her dress caught the light, her diamond earrings winked at the crowd. She smiled the kind of smile that made people lean forward, part charm, part trap. "Watching Emma today," she began, voice smooth as silk, "reminds me of watching her mother 20 years ago. So young, so full of promise." A ripple of polite smiles. But I knew where she was going. Rachel had an MBA, the world at her feet. And yet, she let the pause linger, a knife waiting for flesh. She chose differently. She chose a life of simplicity. A farmer's wife. The air thinned. Emma's shoulders hunched. My father stared at his plate. My mother's hand trembled on her napkin. I'd lived this moment 100 times. At Christmas dinners, Thanksgivings, graduations. Always the same script. Victoria shining, me shrinking. But this was different. This was Emma's day. Victoria's voice carried on, sweet but laced with poison. "I just hope Emma remembers she doesn't have to limit herself. That she can rise higher than her circumstances." The word cut deeper than any insult. Circumstances. As if our life, our farm, our love, was something to escape. And then something shifted. David leaned toward me, his voice barely a whisper. "It's almost time." Almost time for what? His eyes stayed fixed on Victoria, calm, steady, waiting. For the first time in years, I felt the ghost of her power over me slip. Maybe this time, she wouldn't get the last word. Victoria's voice spread through the barn like perfume, sweet on the surface, suffocating underneath. "Of course," she said, pressing her hand dramatically against her chest. "I admire Rachel's perseverance. Not everyone could sacrifice ambition so completely. It takes courage." Laughter flickered uncomfortably from a corner table. A few guests shifted in their chairs. They knew cruelty when they heard it, even if it was dressed in silk. Emma's face drained of color. She kept her eyes on her plate, as if looking up would make the words cut deeper. "My daughter," The child who once wrote essays about saving the soil, who spoke with pride about joining the family farm, was shrinking again, shoulders curling inward like she was 15 and hearing these same digs whispered in the family kitchen. I wanted to stand, to rip the microphone from Victoria's manicured hands, to end it. But David's hand closed over mine again. "Wait," he murmured. His voice was steady, but there was something in his eyes, anticipation, almost readiness. Victoria reached into her clutch and pulled out the cream-colored envelope she'd been guarding all evening. She held it aloft as though it were scripture. "My gift," she announced. "Inside is a letter of introduction to my CEO. Emma, darling, you deserve doors open for you. Real opportunities. Not just," she gestured vaguely at the barn, at the farm, at everything we'd built. "This." The room seemed to lean in, caught between horror and fascination. Even the caterers had frozen in the doorway. My mother's lips parted as if to intervene, but no words came. My father's cane tapped once against the floor, a sound of restrained fury. Marcus's parents exchanged glances. His mother, a federal judge, set her jaw like she was watching contempt in her courtroom. And Emma, poor Emma, blinked rapidly, as though holding back tears that would ruin her carefully painted face. Victoria smiled wider, sensing the shift of attention, feeding off it. "Your mother chose love over success," she continued, voice rich with false sympathy. "But you don't have to make the same mistake." The word mistake fell like a gavel. I couldn't breathe. My MBA diploma flashed in my memory, tucked away in a drawer for years, hidden because of her sneers. The contracts I'd negotiated, the financial models I'd built, the lectures I'd given, all erased in a single cruel sentence. I looked at Emma and saw what was at stake, not just this moment, but the years of therapy it had taken to undo Victoria's poison. If she broke here, in front of 200 witnesses, the damage would ripple into her marriage, her career, her sense of self. My pulse thundered. Do I protect Emma by stopping this, or do I trust whatever David is waiting for? Victoria's voice stripped finality. "So, Emma, promise me. Promise us all that you'll never settle." The barn was silent, and that silence was the heaviest weight I had ever carried. The barn had gone still. Victoria's demand, "Promise us all you'll never settle," hovered in the air like smoke after an explosion. Emma's fingers tightened around Marcus's hand, her lips trembling as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. I rose halfway from my chair, ready to stop it, when the sound of the barn doors opening cut through the silence. Every head turned. A man in a travel-worn suit stepped inside, followed by 2 associates carrying sleek portfolios. His presence shifted the air instantly, calm authority, the kind that doesn't need an introduction. "Apologies for the delay," he said, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Our flight was late, but we couldn't miss celebrating with the Thompson family." The name hit like a dropped stone. Thompson family. My family. Tyler, the MC, nearly dropped his iPad in relief. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced breathlessly, "please welcome James Harrison, Vice President of Procurement for the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Group." A ripple of shock swept the guests. Glasses clinked against plates. Phones lifted discreetly to record. Victoria blinked, her hand frozen mid-gesture, with the envelope still raised. "Ritz-Carlton?" she repeated, as if the syllables themselves were foreign. Mr. Harrison walked directly to David, shaking his hand with the warmth of old colleagues. "We're thrilled about our new partnership. Your farm's produce will elevate our properties across the Pacific Northwest." Gasps. Murmurs. All eyes darted from David's soil-lined hands to Victoria's glittering envelope. "Partnership?" Victoria asked sharply, her smile wobbling. "What kind of?" Before she could finish, Tyler jumped in, his voice almost triumphant. "Thompson Organic Farms has signed an exclusive $2.5 million annual contract with Ritz-Carlton." The silence that followed wasn't disbelief. It was awe. Victoria's arm lowered slowly, the envelope slipping from her fingers to the floor. The cream paper fluttered like a white flag. Emma's eyes widened, tears replaced by something else, pride. She sat up straighter, her hand tightening on Marcus's with a new kind of strength. And David, my quiet, patient David, finally spoke. His voice was steady, not loud, but it carried more weight than any speech Victoria had given in her life. The dirt you laugh at, he said, looking straight at her, has built an enterprise that feeds thousands, employs dozens, and now partners with one of the finest hotel groups in the world. That's what love and work have built together. He paused, then added, it was never a mistake. It was a choice. The best one Rachel and I ever made. The applause didn't burst all at once. It started small, a few claps, then grew into a wave that filled the barn like thunder. Guests rose to their feet. Even Marcus's mother, the judge, wiped her eyes before joining in. Victoria remained standing, pale, her stage stolen, her script unraveling. And Emma, my Emma, rose too. She walked to her aunt, took the microphone gently from her hands, and said with a voice that shook but did not break, I am not ashamed of my roots. I choose them. Applause thundered through the barn, echoing against beams draped in fairy lights. Emma stood tall at the head table, her voice still vibrating in the air. I choose my roots. It was more than defiance. It was liberation. I watched her, my daughter, who had once hidden her pride in whispered half-truths, now claim it in front of 200 witnesses. In that moment, she wasn't just the bride. She was the heir to something bigger than contracts and harvests, the truth of who we were. Victoria sat frozen, her smile cracked, her carefully constructed armor splintering under the weight of silence that belonged only to her. For the first time in her life, she had nothing left to say. The applause softened, replaced by murmurs of admiration, toasts raised in our direction, and the sound of Marcus kissing Emma's temple as though sealing her vow not just to him, but to herself. I wanted to gloat. God, I wanted to. 15 years of swallowed words pressed against my throat. But when I looked at Victoria, pale, trembling, staring down at the envelope on the floor like it was the last prop from a failed performance, something inside me shifted. This wasn't victory. This was revelation. David squeezed my hand, his dirt-etched fingers grounding me. His eyes weren't triumphant. They were steady, as if he'd known all along that this day would come, not to humiliate Victoria, but to free us. The rest of the night blurred into laughter, dancing, the clinking of glasses. Yet beneath it all, I carried the image of my sister's silence. For once, she was the one shrinking, and I was left wondering what would remain when her pride finally shattered. 2 weeks later, I found out. The phone rang while I was reviewing invoices in my office. Her name lit up the screen, Victoria. For a moment, I considered letting it ring out. But something deeper, maybe the part of me that still remembered us as girls sharing a room and secrets, made me answer. Her voice was nothing like the one that had filled the barn. It was small, cracked. Rachel, I've lost everything. The company, Robert, the kids. I don't know what to do. I sat in silence, listening to the rawness I'd never heard from her before. The words spilled out, bankruptcy, investigations, shame. For the first time, there was no performance, only a woman stripped of the image she'd worshipped. Please, she whispered. I need help. The easy thing would have been to hang up. The satisfying thing would have been to remind her of every wound she'd left on me, on Emma, on David. Instead, I took a breath and said the hardest thing. I'll help you, but not with money, with truth. Because money would only rebuild the mask. Truth might save her. Months passed. Slowly, painfully, Victoria began to stitch herself back together. Therapy, honest work, apologies that shook her voice and reddened her eyes. Emma met her for coffee once, and when she came home she told me, she listened, Mom. Really listened. The road back to trust was long, and maybe it would never be complete. But the fact that it had even begun felt like a miracle. As for us, David and I expanded the farm, signed contracts that carried our produce to cities we'd never even visited. Emma joined us after her honeymoon, sleeves rolled up, determination in her step. The land kept teaching us patience, and we kept learning. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I received a text from Victoria. It was a photo from a farmer's market. She'd written only 3 words, bought organic tomatoes. It wasn't much, but it was honest. And maybe that's all success really is. Honesty, roots that hold when the storm comes, the courage to choose love over appearances. For years, Victoria had tried to make me feel small. Yet standing there on my porch, phone glowing in the dusk, I realized something profound. She smirked at my expression, her hand brushing a thick cream-colored envelope tucked into her clutch. It'll be unforgettable. Behind her, guests were beginning to arrive. Old friends, college classmates, neighbors who'd watched Emma grow up. Their laughter floated through the air, mingling with the strings of a violin quartet. The day deserved to be remembered for its love, not for Victoria's theater. But I knew my sister. She wasn't here to celebrate. She was here to perform. And if I wasn't careful, she'd take Emma's day and make it her own.